Altcoins are in a tricky spot right now. Ever since the massive Friday liquidations, we have half of the people telling you to buy the dip and that this is just another dip. But then you have the other half of people saying there's not going to be an altcoin season and to sell your altcoins now. Now, what we're going to do in today's video is I'm going to share with you guys my thoughts and analysis on this. What is going to happen in Q4? We're also going to be taking a look at other crypto analysts. So we have a jam-packed video for you guys. Do me a favor, smash the like button, and if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, and let's talk about crypto altcoins. So without further ado, let's take a look at what Ben Cohen has said on YouTube here. Definitely recommend following him on YouTube as well as on Twitter. So first and foremost, he says, in order for alt season to happen, Ethereum needs to go to 5K and hold it as support. Now, number one, ETH isn't at 5K. The all-time high right now is around 49.50. So if it does go to 5K and hold it, well, that would be a new all-time high. And that is definitely one of the things that I believe ETH is going to do. I do believe that ETH is going to have a new all-time high in Q4. Now, following with that, Ben says for ETH to go to 5K and to hold it as support, it means that Bitcoin needs to also go to all-time highs. The process of Bitcoin going to all-time highs would make Bitcoin dominance go higher just like it has all cycle. Then he says, so the only way to get an alt season is for Bitcoin dominance to go up first because we want Bitcoin to make new highs. If that doesn't happen, then alt season does not happen. So here are a couple things I want to point out from this analysis. I do think that even though Bitcoin dominance would go higher if Bitcoin makes new all-time highs, that doesn't necessarily mean that altcoins don't go up at the same time. It just means that Bitcoin's dominance is going up as Bitcoin represents a higher market cap or a market share of the total crypto market cap. We've seen from time to time Bitcoin bring up the entire markets, and that is in terms of US dollar value to altcoins still means that it can go up as we see Bitcoin reach new all-time highs. Now, if we pull up a chart and we look at Bitcoin, I want to share with you guys a few things about, the Bitcoin chart as to why I remain bullish for the current cycle we're in. And if you look at this, we have our Bitcoin chart. What we have here is the 50-week moving average. We can see that ever since we went above it back in the 2022 bear market, when we got out of that bear market, we've been above and holding this blue line as support. And that is, to me, the real definition of whether or not Bitcoin's going to continue going up or it's going to fall to lower prices. We've seen it back here, it held support on this 50-week moving average. Here again in April, we do see wicks below it, but again, talking about weekly candle close, we are still above it. And to me, that means that Bitcoin is going to continue upwards. If it does fall back to that 50-week moving average and goes below it, we would have to reevaluate that situation. But for now, Bitcoin is still in a macro uptrend and still in that bull market, which is why I believe that we could continue going higher for Bitcoin. As simple as that, that's going to be the end of that story. If you want to have a different opinion, that is entirely up to you. Now, if we talk about Bitcoin dominance, I want to share with you guys a few things about Bitcoin dominance because if you look at where this actually topped this cycle, for now, it's at roughly 66%, and 66% was achieved right in the late parts of June. Now, if you go back to Bitcoin's chart and you look at the later parts of June, what was happening to the price of Bitcoin back then? Well, going back to the end of June puts us right over here when Bitcoin was around, $110,000. Now, at that time, that was, Bitcoin trying to go to new all-time highs as it had just made a new all-time highs a few weeks earlier. But then what happened was, Bitcoin dominance really fell down and continued falling down all the way up until the 15th or the middle part of September. And I want you guys to remember these dates because if we go back to your others, so if you go to the others chart, these are basically your crypto altcoins excluding the top 10. if we go back to the end of June, this is when Bitcoin was, trying to break new all-time highs. Bitcoin dominance was at the highest, but altcoins at the end of June were actually, right around here, around $230 billion of market cap. And they weren't nearly as high as where they were, just previously in May or previously in December, January timeframe, where everything was going crazy. Now, of course, that makes sense, right? Because altcoins are going down, Bitcoin dominance is continuing to go up, and Bitcoin is almost making new highs, which is why Bitcoin represents a higher market share of the total crypto market cap and why Bitcoin dominance is going up. Now, if we take a look at the 15th of September, it is again a very interesting point in time, because if you look at when Bitcoin dominance actually bottomed, it was when altcoins actually topped. So if we look at altcoins yet again towards the middle part of September, this is where we have a local top for altcoins. And looking at Bitcoin dominance at the middle part of, September, you have yet again another local bottom for Bitcoin dominance, right around 56, 57%. So this is exactly what Ben is saying here, because if we want Bitcoin to make a new all-time high, to get an altcoin season, well, for that to happen, BTC dominance is likely to continue going up until it really falls into an altcoin season. But again, I don't think that can happen until we do get another Ethereum, push to the upside. And for that to happen, you need the whole market, or you need Bitcoin to really strive to a new all-time high before we get these massive drops in Bitcoin dominance. Now, the good thing is, and why I do believe that, this is going to happen slowly and surely into, the later parts of Q4, is because we've started seeing that rotation in Ethereum. And as you guys know, liquidity goes from Bitcoin to Ethereum to large caps, and then finally it's altcoin season. But if you look at Ethereum's charts, you can tell that Ethereum has gained dominance over Bitcoin. And that's what we're waiting for altcoins, but we haven't seen it just yet. We've seen different narratives break through alongside the last few years, which, were very profitable, but we haven't seen that major 2017 or 2021 altcoin season. So if we take a look at Ethereum's chart, well, it made a new all-time high in, the middle parts of August, right around $49.50, as we said. Now, Ethereum is around $4,000. It's not really near its all-time high. We're still talking about 25% or so to the all-time high. But correlating that to Bitcoin dominance, if you go back to the middle parts of August, Bitcoin dominance was in a pure downfall because ETH was gaining dominance against Bitcoin. And you can easily spot that with, Ethereum dominance chart. If you pull that up, you can see that we had a peak of Ethereum dominance in the middle of August. But what is good about this chart is that ever since April, we have seen ETH gain dominance against Bitcoin slowly but surely. And as it continues to do so, we are in the ETH phase of that liquidity flow. And again, there has been, sparks of altcoin seasons or mini altcoin seasons or narratives doing well alongside this market, as we've indicated time and time again. You have, these little blurps of altcoins doing better than Bitcoin and having them, go up for a few weeks or a month or two, just like we saw in December, just like we saw in October, and just like we saw in, the July to August frame when we had Ethereum do very well. So all of this is essentially what Ben is saying. I absolutely agree with it, but right now for altcoins, I do think we are still in this macro downtrend, and you can definitely see that we're not in these uptrends where we had, the 2021 altcoin season and the 2017 altcoin season. But I do still think that Bitcoin is going to reach a new all-time high and Ethereum is going to reach a new all-time high, which is going to slowly trickle liquidity into altcoins. Now, you can obviously, do your own research, not financial advice whatsoever, but buying altcoins right now or waiting for them to, bottom out when you don't really know what the bottom is, well, that is entirely up to you. You can continue dollar cost averaging in your altcoins on dips, and you can also, wait for Bitcoin to make new all-time highs. But if Bitcoin makes new all-time highs, well, it doesn't mean that the value in USD of your altcoin won't go up, because we've seen that as well as Bitcoin pumps. It usually brings the altcoins and ETH with it, which is kind of the entire circle of cryptocurrencies. So, of course, entirely up to you, but if I share with you guys some of the other rationale as to why I remain bullish on this cycle and why I still believe we can go higher from here, well, first and foremost, if you look at the Fear and Greed Index, right now, as I'm recording this, it's the 15th of October and the fear is at 34. This just means that people are panicking. There was massive liquidations just a few days ago, and people are not sure what's going to happen. And again, when there's fear in the market, there is opportunity. When there's greed in the market, it's usually a sign that you should be looking at taking profits, especially during a bull market. We've seen, a few instances of that. You can go back to December 2024. You can see that there was greed in the markets, and then we had an absolute sell-off all the way into April. So it just goes to show that when there is fear, there is opportunity, and typically the market doesn't, top when there's fear in the space. So keep that one in mind. Number two, if we take a look at ETFs, we are still seeing positive inflows into ETFs, Bitcoin and Ethereum, and that is a new investment vehicle for retail traders. Likely, people that don't have crypto wallets are investing directly into cryptocurrencies through these ETFs. And even though that liquidity may not flow into altcoins, it is still, putting crypto to the eyes of the world. And I do think that crypto adoption is important for that liquidity cycle to happen and for it to be even bigger than the previous one in 2021 and again in 2017. So this is still a bullish thing to me. If you look at historically speaking, what is Q4? What is October for Bitcoin returns? Well, they are the biggest bullish months, and we are just entering October. Although, midway through October, we have Bitcoin down about 2.3%. But on average, it goes up 20%, on average in November, 46%, and on average in December, about 5%. Well, if Bitcoin starts plummeting, it doesn't mean that these averages are going to realize themselves yet again. It is just an average, but you have to be ready to understand that if Bitcoin loses that 50-week moving average and continues selling off and loses key levels of support on the way down, well, you can't really look at, November is supposed to bring a 46% upside to Bitcoin. So understand that, keep monitoring everything on a day-to-day basis. That's for Bitcoin. If you do the same thing for Ethereum, again, you have October about 4%, November about 8%, and December about 7%. So still a bullish, Q4 for Ethereum as well. Now, if we move on to other things more in the macroeconomic sense of things, we still have 2 rate cuts happening towards the end of the year. We have one, right in about 2 weeks' time. That's going to be a 0.25 basis cut. And again, in mid-December, there's likely going to be another 0.25 cut. These rate cuts are typically very bullish for stocks, equities, as well as crypto. Risk on assets do well when the Fed cuts rates. Basically puts more money in people's pockets. And on top of that, we just had Jerome Powell speak a few days ago, and he was essentially saying that there is a chance that in the next few months, the Fed could end quantitative tightening. that's been going on for practically the last 3 years. It says here that, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell spoke on Tuesday that the central bank's 3-year campaign to shrink its $6.6 trillion balance sheet could end within months while keeping the door open for further interest rate cuts. We already know about the interest rates, but if you take a look at the Fed balance sheet, go on to the Federal Reserve's website here, and you can see that they've been cutting or selling treasury assets since May of 2022. This line going down, meaning that they are selling their assets and they're, essentially tightening up liquidity. Quantitative tightening is that, and you can see that they've reached that $6.6 trillion goal. And potentially within the next few months, they would stop quantitative tightening. Does not mean that they're going ahead and doing quantitative easing and buying back, but it just means that they won't be selling off and liquidity conditions won't be as restrictive. And let me remind you, even though it's not quantitative easing, in 2017, we had the bull market that we had, and it was a neutral balance sheet for the Fed. So they weren't doing QT, they weren't doing QE. And again, that could be happening in the next few months, which is again another reason why I still believe that we are going to see new highs for cryptocurrencies. Now, if we move on and talk about money to supply, if you just compare the last cycles to what we're seeing right now, this is tracking about 20 central banks here. So it's not just the US, but you can see that M2 in 2017, much bigger. This is the green area we're looking at, much bigger and than what we currently are seeing. If you look at 2021 cycle, again, much bigger. Again, liquidity, quantitative tightening is all going to help M2. Right now, we are not seeing a whole lot of M2. We're not seeing a whole lot of liquidity in the markets. And again, that is likely to come with interest rate cuts and QT potentially ending. So that's another reason why I remain bullish. And to top it all off, to put the cherry on top of things, if you look at these bull market peak indicators from CoinGlass, none of these have hit just yet. There's 30 indicators in here, and none of them are, signaling that the market has topped for this cycle. So of course, all of these are my opinions. We are, not living in a world where we can predict the future with certainty, but you can look at what has happened in the past, try and correlate it to what's going to happen in the future. You can look at charts, look at different levels. So that's going to be the conclusion of this. I do believe that Bitcoin's going to make a new all-time high, Ethereum as well, and then we're going to see altcoins really start moving. But when that happens is going to have to be seen in the next weeks and months to come. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. If you are interested in seeing what I am doing in the space, because like I said, there are opportunities. Even though the macro altcoins are going down, there are still plenty of opportunities on different ecosystems. So if you are interested in joining our private community, there is a link in the description below. It's the first one in there. You're going to get to see the research that I do, the coins I buy, the coins I sell, and join a community of like-minded people for the altcoin season. If that is something you're interested in, first link in the description below. If not, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button. Thank you guys for all the love and support, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Peace.